Welcome to Before You Vote. I'm Mike Broomhead. This CW7 special program is here to help you, the voter, understand the 2024 primary election. We'll be talking with candidates and data analysts to give you insight into who and what is on the ballot. Today, we're talking about the recent immigration ballot measure that's passing through the state legislature, known as the Secure the Border Act. With that comes the possibility that you, the voter, will decide on illegal immigration and how it will be enforced at our border in the years ahead. First, we're talking with the president of the Arizona State Senate, Warren Petersen, about why Arizona voters should support the measure. Then we talk with the president of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, Seiden, about business concerns if the ballot measure is passed. Later in the show, Mike Noble with Noble Predictive Insights will share the latest data on who's ahead in the 2024 presidential race in our Tracking Arizona segment. This is a show you're not going to want to miss. It's called Before You Vote. We'll be back here in exactly 60 seconds. Welcome back to Before You Vote. The conversation is about HCR 2060, where the voters may be deciding on immigration laws in Arizona and the enforcement by local law enforcement. Joining us is Senate President Warren Petersen. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
HCR 2060, some people are calling it controversial. How much does it mirror the Texas law that's being challenged in the Supreme Court, and where is it different?
Yeah, so the similarity is where we deal with the border, and we've called it the Border Security Act. This is truly a border security bill. And the part where we're similar is that we are focused on stopping illegal entry into the state. An area that's different is lawful presence. We don't have anything to do with lawful presence in the bill. So that's probably the biggest distinction. We also have a piece in there about fentanyl because that's flooding across the border, and we codify benefits for people who come here illegally that you can't receive them.
So when people are saying it compares to SB 1070, which was a very controversial piece of legislation, and they're saying it's going to lead to racial profiling, how is that not true? Because it sounds to me, if you're talking about in very specific areas, it would make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, there's really no way you can spin this to make it where it's racial profiling. I think that's the opposition is grasping at that. It's really not taking hold. I haven't heard it too much. I've heard it a couple times, but it's really not taking hold because there's just there's no way there's racism involved. It's we're talking about over 100 countries that are crossing the border, all different nationalities, all different skin types, and the bottom line is if somebody is crossing that border illegally, they can now be detained and go through the judicial process and be removed from the country.
We've heard from the head of the prison system in Arizona concerned about overwhelming prisons. There are some people in law enforcement who are talking about unfunded mandates. Is there a concern about cost?
Yeah, so illegal immigration costs over $2 billion a year to the state of Arizona. Some of the numbers that have been thrown out there by the governor's nominee are like hundreds of millions. $2 billion is a lot more. The $2 billion savings is a lot more than the $100 million, $200 million. And the bottom line is we funded law enforcement. They're already dealing with this problem. This will create deterrence, and the deterrence will save the state money.
One of the issues, and it's an issue I've had, is with ballot initiatives, is that it alters the Constitution and it makes it harder for the legislature to go in and make changes if it's necessary. What happens if there's unintended consequences? How can adjustments be made? Yeah,
so this is actually a statutory referral. It's not. It doesn't amend the Constitution. It is statutory, but it can be amended by a 3/4 vote of the legislature if it furthers the purpose. And so if there's an issue that needs to be changed, 3/4 of the legislature can make that amendment, and as long as it furthers the purpose, which would be, the purpose is to protect and secure the border.
Ultimately, we would hope that the federal government was doing its job. It wouldn't be necessary to do something like this. But outside of that, it seems like Arizonans are clamoring for this. Do you have numbers? Have you talked to people about what the expectation is of this passing? Because the voters will have a chance. It goes through the legislative process. Then the voters can say yes to this. Are you confident it's going to pass?
I feel like it will, based off of the polling I've seen, but also based off of what I'm hearing from my constituents. Every time I'm meeting with constituents, this is one of the top 3 issues that they discuss with me. Also, as I've seen any kind of polling where people have concerns about what's happening in Arizona, the border, securing the border has been one of the top concerns.
What about the business side of this? There's a lot of people in the business community that are concerned about a backlash or concerned about how it might affect the business community. Do you believe this is going to have an adverse effect anywhere on businesses?
Yeah, we made sure, we went through the bill, we made sure that there was nothing that would affect businesses. This is truly a Border Security Act. It deals with stopping the unprecedented flow at the border. So it really doesn't have anything to do with businesses. Businesses aren't, can't be held culpable in any way. It simply has to deal with border crossings and nothing else.
So explain what that means. Law enforcement has to actually physically see somebody cross the border. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that would be the main example. I mean, the 2 probably top things would be, first of all, border security would have to witness somebody crossing illegally. There might be a video of somebody crossing illegally, less likely. And then, of course, if somebody admits. Besides that, that's probably going to cover 99% of the scenarios, but there may be another scenario where they have probable cause to witness somebody crossing the border.
So this isn't you pulling somebody over, law enforcement pulling somebody over and asking to see their credentials or see their papers, and that's what everybody keeps saying is going to happen.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up that's a lawful presence situation. This is the federal law, which is, we're just copying the federal law that says if you're going to enter this country, you have to come through a legal port of entry. That's all it has to deal with. It's witnessing people not coming through the legal port of entry like they're supposed to. A huge part of this, and you're seeing it in Texas right now, is the deterrence. By passing this law, by enforcing the law that the federal government should be enforcing but is not, we will deter a lot of people from crossing. And you're seeing the crossings in Texas have gone way down. Meanwhile, the other border states, their crossings have increased. I imagine it's the crossings that are now not going through Texas have now shifted to the other border states.
So in other words, Arizona, if we don't do something, then we could see an immense increase in crossings because Texas is going to be stopping people, and obviously the cartels are just going to reroute people.
Yeah, and we're seeing it already, and 100%, Mike, 100%.
Listen, I appreciate the time today. I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes through the process and what the voters in Arizona have to say. Under ideal circumstances, it wouldn't be a concern, but obviously it's something that's very concerning to Arizona, so we appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Senate President Warren Petersen, it's HCR 2060, be an educated voter, and this is one of the ways to get educated on the big issues. We'll be back. Coming up, who's pulling ahead in the U.S. presidential race, Trump or Biden? Then later in the show, will the proposed ballot measure on immigration be bad for Arizona businesses? This is Before You Vote. All right, welcome. This is our Tracking Arizona segment. Joining us is the CEO of Noble Predictive Insights, Mike Noble. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Mike.
Let's talk about the presidential election in Arizona voters. It looks like it's very narrow, about 3 points for President Trump when it's head-to-head. What do you think of this?
I think it tells you why Arizona is a battleground state to begin with on the presidential map. I mean, Arizona was only carried by Biden by 11,000 votes, and he was the first Democrat to carry it since Bill Clinton in the 80s. So right now, Trump has the advantage right now, but the race is still close. We expect it to be close, and ultimately that 15% may ultimately decide who wins or loses Arizona, but it's the reason why we're a battleground state, and the Real Clear Politics average has it about Trump plus 4.6, so slight edge to Trump right now, but we still have 4 or 5 months to go till Election Day, so we'll see where it goes.
What does it mean to you when you add in the other candidates, RFK Jr. and others, and it expands the lead for Trump? What does that tell you?
So what it tells you is that, you have basically the red team and blue team, but now you're injecting this third variable, and the big thing is who are they pulling more votes away from? And what the data clearly shows, at least here in Arizona, is that it is a bigger benefit to Trump. He only loses about 1 point compared to where he was in the head-to-head, where Biden loses about 4 or 5 points. So basically, RFK Jr. is a benefit to Trump and a liability to Joe Biden.
Let's talk about party and candidate loyalty. I was very surprised by this. You see a pretty big lead where Trump loyalists outpace party loyalists on the Republican side, but it's a much different story on the Democrat side.
Oh, yeah, this is interesting. So this is one of the questions we've been tracking for some time now. And over that time series, people have always identified more as party first, so for the party platform and not Trump. But what it shows that this is the first time that we've shown in our data that he's actually ahead of people more identifying Republicans as Trump Republicans and party. So basically it shows you, what does that mean? It means that he's really, solidified his base, in the primary. So they're kind of behind him, where Biden, you can clearly see Biden's not exactly getting his base motivated. There's very few, if any, that are very much behind him. And again, that's a problem for Biden. That's why he's been kind of struggling in the 6 battleground states, especially here in Arizona.
Is it more good news for Trump or bad news for Biden?
Good news for Trump, bad news for Biden.
All right. Well, listen, Mike, as always, your expertise is invaluable to us. We always appreciate the data and always interested in what the Arizona voters are saying. So thanks again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
All right. That's Mike Noble once again. We'll be back here in a few moments on Before You Vote. Coming up, President and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, Danny Seiden, talks about the potential impacts of HCR 2060 on businesses. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote, our continuing discussion about HCR 2060, but a different perspective, this time from the Chamber of Commerce. The CEO, Danny Seiden, thanks for doing this.
No, Michael, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I love your perspective, and I think it's because it isn't partisan. This truly is what you believe is best for the Arizona economy.
100%. It's what my members believe. We're the largest business organization in the state, so we check in with all of them on a big issue like this. We've collected kind of their concerns, their thoughts, what they're worried about, and that's kind of how we've set what our position is right now. And this is, as you know, it's a measure that's changing. It's changed since the last time you and I spoke.
Right. So where are we? 2060, business concerns, business reputation, boycotts like SB 1070. What are you seeing?
Let me start first with what the concerns are. I have a lot of concerns, and my members have concerns with what's happening with our open borders right now. As you know, the only time the federal government has done anything to close the border was to close the legal point of entry at Lukeville, which we talked about 7 months ago, which was a disaster. So the fact that we've had record amounts of illegal crossings is a huge problem for my members, because what my members want is legal immigration. They want high-skilled workers. They want visa reform. They want to be able to pair people with green cards. These are all things we've been fighting for years. And as long as we have a porous border, that won't happen. So when the federal government fails, we understand that why the state is doing what they're doing. Does that mean we like the policy completely? No, and there's a couple reasons why, and I'll get to that. But let me just get right into this boycott issue. This will not happen this time. Our business community is diverse. We've been here. We know how great a state this is. We know it's an opportunity for all state. We know that a state legislature, much like Texas with SB 4, trying to do something on their border because the federal government failed, is not a reason to call for a boycott of your own state. So that's not happening.
But don't you also think that the opinions, I just read a story today that 20%, 1 in 5 hotels in New York City are now shelters. That when you see cities that are not border cities and in border states, when they're feeling the effects of this, they now empathize or sympathize with Arizona, and you're not going to see those kinds of attitudes.
You're 100% right. One of the number one reasons why this is not 1070 is, look where we are now compared to where we were then. Right now, everyone is feeling illegal immigration. They've been shipped around to all the major cities, starting with Governor DeSantis and Governor Ducey, really making sure the whole country knows what it feels like to have to house people who come here and abuse our asylum program. So that it's not 1070. We know this is a problem. We feel it's a problem. There's a public safety concern, and there's a fentanyl thing too that we haven't discussed yet.
Which is a part of this piece of legislation.
Yeah, there's a penalty enhancement in there, and fentanyl's coming across the border. So something has to be done. Our members feel that, and they see it. The question is this policy, is 2060 the best way to do it? And that's kind of where we differ right now, because it's a referral, Mike. And when you pass a referral in Arizona, because of the Voter Protection Act, you can't touch it. So for instance, there's a part of this referral that requires employers like mine to use E-Verify, which we all do right now. But 10 years from now, there might be a new technology. And how do you go back and fix that? How do you change that? It's very hard. It's a very tough way to do legislation from the ballot box and to put this on the voters, because the voters all feel it right now. I imagine this will pass, but is it the best policy? And that's the question we have.
But the other point to this is, if Arizona doesn't do something, and Texas has, aren't we going to feel a huge increase in crossers here because the cartels will reroute the traffic into Arizona? And if we're not stopping it locally, aren't we in danger of even more people coming?
It's an interesting, question. You brought this up last time we talked. I tried to do a little bit of research, and we have seen since SB 4 in Texas was passed an increase at the San Diego port and at our port as well. So there does seem to be a redirection. So when a state takes action, cartels are sophisticated. They seem to know that, and they seem to find a different port to come in. Now, again, this is a really tough law to enforce. It puts a lot of pressure on our local law enforcement that are already strapped for resources. And I do think that's where the governor has some valid points. Where you stand on something depends on where you sit. And if you're sitting in the governor's office and you say, I have to pay for this, I have to pay for these mandatory detentions, and we're not being reimbursed right now. We weren't back in Ducey's time when I was in the governor's office. They're certainly not now. That's a resource issue. So there's, like I said, a lot of concerns.
But the defense on the other side, on the pro side of this, is we're spending over $2 billion a year in illegal immigration and the cost to Arizona voters. If there's a $200 or $300 million price tag versus the billions you could save, does that argument wash with you from a business standpoint?
It's tough, again, because when you pass something through referral, it's a mandate. So from now through all time, unless the voters change it, it's going to be really hard to ever undo this new responsibility we're taking on as a state that has always been the responsibility of the federal government, which is the housing, right? So you look at Department of Corrections, how are they going to do this? How are we going to account for this? That's more guards, more space. And so no, I don't think it washes equally, because this problem could die down. I mean, the president has executive powers he could use now. I heard Justice Andy Gould on the radio just yesterday talking about numerous ways in which the executive could crack down on this now, and they're not. But one day, there might be a different person in the White House, and that person might decide to crack down, but Arizona could still be on the hook for some of this. So again, we want to make sure we get the best policy possible. It has gotten a lot better. It's very narrow.
Is it more about the way it's being done through the referral process? Because I'm not a fan of our propositional form of government either, and what it does to the Constitution and how it alters things. Is it more about that process versus the policy itself?
100%. We have seen time and time again our hands being tied by the referral process, because what sounds like a great idea at the time isn't a great idea 20 or 30 years from now.
Well, education spending.
Education. Last time the funding formulas were touched for education has been 4 decades, and a lot of that is because they're so tied in with different propositions. And so to bring immigration into that, it's tough, but we understand why. I know Senator Shamp tried to do it legislatively. Unfortunately, that measure was vetoed. There was no agreement on that yet. I would imagine there's a way to get the governor, who has shown the ability to stand up to the White House on this, who has shown, hey, when they closed Lukeville, she went right after the White House on that. So maybe there's a way to get this done legislatively, but you're right. The process is our biggest concern, and how it ties our hands for the future and what it does to the state's budget. But I also understand, how dangerous these open borders are. 3 people will die in Maricopa County today because of fentanyl. That's a statistic from Rachel Mitchell. So we're very concerned about that.
And I also would imagine in the business community the concern with the uprising in crime that's connected to the fentanyl epidemic and how it's killing so many people. The heat-related deaths in Maricopa County connected to fentanyl. I mean, that's a big issue.
Yeah, no, most of the, as you know, nearly all of the heat-related deaths that happen during the summer are for unhoused people. And unhoused people have a higher incidence with the drug use and fentanyl as well. So it is 100% all connected. And I will say this about the reputational damage. What I don't love is anyone trying to use this as an opportunity to attack our state. It's not my job to defend this measure, but it is my job to defend our state. So anybody who will say that this measure means Arizona is racist or our law enforcement turns racist, I take huge objection to that, because we're not. We're a state that's doing its best to defend its borders. And again, we're a state that's welcome. We're a state that's really becoming more and more of an international hub. I mean, Mexico's our largest trading partner times 4. We have a great relationship with that country. And these are not people coming from Mexico trying to get work. These are people abusing our asylum program.
This is why I love having him on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it so much.
We'll be back. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Thank you to Arizona Senate President Warren Petersen and the Arizona Chamber of Commerce President Danny Seiden. If you missed an episode or you want to revisit an old one, head over to cw7az.com/vote. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next Sunday right here on Before You Vote.